Oh wow, I never thought I'd be doing movie reviews on this channel, but here we are. And oh boy, what a first review this is gonna be. Today we're gonna be reviewing Matt Walsh's controversial movie, What Is a Woman? And before I start with the actual review, I'd like to give a little bit of a personal anecdote when it comes to me asking the question to the people around me. A few days ago, I think the day after the movie premiered, I was having a conversation with my dad about the typical question and some of the stuff in the film. And what I've learned, and this is part of what Matt Walsh learns in the movie, is that the left is the one who made the question, "What is a woman?" so loaded. Like, it's crazy, just the feats of mental gymnastics that people try to do to just justify something that is blatantly untruthful. But personal opinions aside, I also kind of want to talk about, I guess, why he made the movie, why Matt Walsh made the movie. Um, and simple, like he just wanted to see if the left could make a consistent definition that wasn't a circular definition either. There were a lot of circular definitions in the film, but other than that, like his intentions were like, once again, he's just a guy trying to figure out answers. Like obviously, there was some, I guess, behind the scenes stuff. And if you watch any of Matt Walsh's videos, notably his talk show, the Matt Walsh Show, you will find that he doesn't agree with any of this, any of the gender ideology nonsense. But he had to, if he even wanted to have a chance to talk to some of these people, it's like, he had to basically just like go in it from a completely neutral stance. Like there's a reason why he didn't start talking about like Christianity and such. And that's mainly because, like, well, in his words, that's what the left would have wanted. But anyways, I think that's enough with this little preamble here. Let's actually get to the review. Alright, so let's start this review, shall we? So the first thing I really liked about it was just like the random street interviews. I think they they definitely created a lot of comedic bits in it, especially when he was kind of going from city to city, and then he just kind of uses them like in between him going to the major interviews of the film, and like the reactions that people had to the question of what is a woman. I found them to be to be just like really fucking retarded, but also like it's just like I had a feeling like some people were just kind of scared to really answer the question in a concise and consistent manner. And this is probably because, well, I don't think many people or people who were being street interviewed at all like knew who Matt Walsh was beforehand. They probably do now because they were in the movie. But like I don't think they knew that he's a conservative Christian man. So that probably made him a little bit on edge to really say a clear and consistent answer. I think my favorite, and I put favorite in quotes here, street interview would have to be with when he's interviewing two women, and one of the women is like, well, if Matt asked the question, or says something like, my truth is that you don't exist, and then she answers the sort of question with, well, I mean, if that's your truth, then I don't exist. And it's just like, I was just like, oh my god, like, that's just fucking crazy that people are that stupid to say an answer like that. Like, I mean, I could get into a whole spiel about the phrase "my truth." I'm probably gonna do that in another video or something. But continuing on, another part of the movie I really liked was when Matt Walsh went to Kenya to visit the Maasai tribe. And the reason why I like this part quite a lot is it's mainly for the fact that Matt has to ask these people all these dumbass questions, like can a man become a woman? What about non-binary? Like, just stuff like that. And I was laughing, and the tribes people who had to answer the questions were laughing at him. And it's just like, knowing that Matt doesn't believe in any of this stuff, and he even said this in an episode of his talk show, and he also, I think he also said that in a Turning Point event, and basically he was just like, I was so tempted to just just say to them that I don't believe in any of the things that I'm asking them, but I had to swallow my pride and just continue on. And then I guess another bit that I enjoyed seeing was when he was reading his book Johnny the Walrus to the Maasai children. And I mean, I'm not really gonna go too in depth with Johnny the Walrus or his Dr. Phil interview, or debate, I should say. It's not really an interview, but his debate on Dr. Phil. I'm not really gonna mention that all that much unless it's like kind of necessary. But aside from that, it was just like I found it to be I found it to be really humorous, and I think it absolutely was needed in the film, because oftentimes, like, you do hear the left say, like, well, if we just go back to nature, well, then these gender roles aren't really going to exist, or something like, if you look at tribal societies, they don't have these rigid gender roles. But in reality, it's quite the opposite, and that's what the film wanted to say, and it did a good job at that. All while humiliating Matt. So next up on my little list I have here about the points I really liked about the movie, it would be his interview with Dr. Miriam Grossman. And basically, like, this interview talks a lot about Dr. Kinsey and Dr. Money, two very, I use this word in quotes, important in terms of this issue of gender ideology. And she goes over like the origins of kind of like where a lot of this bullshit comes from, and how it kind of was like set into motion. Like, Kinsey was the one to kind of set this depravity into motion, and Money was the one to really like solidify the castle, you could say. Kinsey was the one who made the foundation, and Money actually built the castle, you could say, if you want to use that analogy. I like how heavy hitting this particular interview was, where like it was, once again, with a lot of the major interviews of the movie, it's mainly the people being interviewed who's doing the talking. Matt's just asking the questions. Like, that's an approach I really like. But I think the interview with Dr. Grossman went above and beyond, not only in just explaining who these depraved people who invented all this shit was, but also, like, she actually uses an example of how inappropriate, like, modern day sex education is to children. Like, she pulls out a book, like a children's book for ages 10 and up, and it shows a drawing of a man and a woman doing the old in and out. And it's just like, I was disgusted by that. I thoroughly was, and I think, Matt was too. The guy's a father too. He's a husband and a father, as he says in the beginning of the movie. And it's just like, books like that were from a bunch of Kinsey's bullshit studies about, like, human sexuality. And so the interview with Dr. Grossman, a lot of the harder hitting stuff appears kind of later in the movie, but it's still important nonetheless. But I think I rambled on about Dr. Grossman enough. It's time to move on to the next little bullet point, and that would be the female athlete interviews. Because this movie is about gender ideology, it's certainly having its impact in sports. If you've been following with the whole Leah Thomas thing, Matt Walsh actually does interview a teammate on the UPenn swim team, which I was like, when I first heard that, listening to an episode of the Matt Walsh show, and he actually mentions that, I was just like, woo boy, that's gonna be nice to finally hear a teammate's perspective, because I've heard bits and pieces about it, but not really to the full extent of, like, having a full-fledged interview with a teammate of hers. And I'm glad that she was anonymous, as she mentions why she had to be anonymous. Daily Wire was respectful of that. But there were also some other athletes who were interviewed, mainly on the track and field side of things, as there are numerous examples of, like, trans athletes, like, completely dominating the competition, and how it's just like it's not exactly fair, and it's just like, he talks to a couple other athletes about this as well, and, like, it was a little soul crushing to hear that it was just like these women's opportunities were just taken from them because of some mentally ill guy. Like, I'm sorry that I had to put it that way, but that's just how it is. Like, that's just reality. All right. So next up would be the hardest hitting interview, which would be his interview with Scott Nugent, originally named Kelly. Also, her birth name was in parentheticals, like in little whatever. But when I was watching this the first time, I nearly cried, and it's because like with Scott, like, you see a victim of all this bullshit. Like, so throughout her life, she was a lesbian. She liked she was a bit more of a masculine woman, and she basically got groomed at 42 years. She got groomed into getting a highly experimental surgery. And I don't know. I don't know. I was like, I don't know how to exactly respond until it hit me. Until it really fucking hit me. And it was just like, I knew, like, the surgeries were beyond fucked up. I knew that, like all like, a lot of the shit that they were doing. I mean, I knew that they were injecting, like, some drugs. I knew puberty blockers were not the best thing. It's not merely just putting puberty on pause. I learned so much from her, just about how bad this demon really is. To say the least. It's like you don't get the full picture. You could do as much research on this issue as you want, but when you're seeing somebody talk to a victim of all this face to face, it hits really different. It really does. And it was easily the saddest part of the film, but also easily the most important part of the film, because it just exposes how evil all this shit really is. So with that being said, she also talks about just like how Big Pharma really benefits from all this. In the words of Scott herself, I think, like, I keep in mind when I'm quoting, like, it's not going to be exact quotes, but I try my best. And she says, for the first time in history, a marginalized group has a $sign over their heads. And what she's referring to is just all the money that gets made from the hormones, from the surgeries. And keep in mind, those surgeries are really fucking expensive. So what you have here is that you have a bunch of corrupt pharmaceutical corporations and a bunch of basically mutilation specialists just really trying to get to as many people as possible with all this stuff, and it's evil. I don't know how else to put it. It's evil, and I'm glad that this was included in the film. It's absolutely important to understand, like, just how far deep this goes. And to say the least, it really strengthened the overall message of the film. Next up on the list, we have Dr. Deborah So. So basically, she was actually kind of one of those psychiatrists who actually tried to do the whole quote unquote affirming thing, but she then realized that it's just like, wait a second, this isn't exactly scientific. It's not exactly right. And so what she does now is, well, the exact opposite. She's actually trying to help these people who are suffering from gender dysphoria, instead of just trying to affirm a delusion. And she talks about just how the numerous amounts of studies being done that aren't really going to be released to the public because of activist groups meddling with them. And then also, it's like, if you don't really appeal to the alphabet mafia, and that's mainly who these activists are. They're members of the alphabet mafia. And they're basically messing up science, even though psychology isn't really a science, but that's another video for another day. But still, you are meddling in actual progress, in actual discovery of the truth, all because these people, they want to remain in a world of delusion. They want to keep living in a circular lie. And once again, it just benefits the overall message of the film. I'm not sure what else to say here, but it does, it's another needed perspective in a movie like this. Next up would be Carl Truman. So he's a historian and a theologian. I think that's how you say that word. I'm not really too keen on... I know it's theology, but whatever. But basically, he talks about the idea about how all this like gender stuff is a social contagion. Like you see this shit on TikTok all the time, and he, along with Dr. Grossman and Scott Nugent, like they all like not together in the same room. They're all separate interviews, but basically what happens is like he talks about just like, you know, with TikTok, you like the outcasts can finally have some kind of a home, and then Dr. Grossman and Scott Nugent can kind of continue with their own perspectives about how this kind of catches on. I think there's also a couple more words from Dr. So about this as well. But yeah, you can watch the film for yourself as well. I'm merely just going off some points here. It's a very rambly review, I know. But anyways, he talks about the feeling of like you know, if I'm not happy immediately, like, you know, people get so much into their feelings now that their identity is whatever they're feeling right now. And I think that that's an important thing to bring to the table, is that it's like, yeah, like we're taught that it's like, you know, we always have to be like some kind of happy, like right now. Like it doesn't have to be like long-term happiness. You know, it has to be instant happiness. Like, and if I'm not feeling happy right now, then my identity will change with that. That is how he views the problem, at least. And when it comes to like the people who don't necessarily like fit in, like they take a look at like TikTok and they see like stuff like, oh my god, I'm gender fluid, it's so kooky and cool, and I'm oppressed. It's like that person who's watching that, it's like, hey, yeah, you know, I could kind of relate, because they're looking for a sense of belonging, when in reality it's like that lifestyle is only going to make them, I guess, not happy. But continuing on with some smaller points, I really like how in some of the other interviews that I didn't really brush up on, like they just have this circular definition of what a woman is. Like he even is selling that as like I forget if it's like a pin. I know he's selling it as a sticker. It's just like, it's like a woman is someone who identifies as a woman, or something like that, because he even talks to a gender studies professor about what is a woman, and like what is womanhood, like a bunch of stuff. And then it's just like, it's just this circular reasoning that drives any sane person crazy, because it's like, you're not giving a definition. Like when they say a woman is somebody who identifies as a woman, it's like, but what are they identifying as? And that's what Matt asks when it comes to these circular definitions. You even find them in the street interviews too. But basically, like in another interview with I forget that doctor, but she had like blue hair, like, and she spoke in this really condescending tone of voice. Like she was when they were talking about, like, you know, chickens. Well, Matt was talking about like I see a female chicken who lays eggs, and it's just, and then the doctor is like, does that chicken cry? Does that chicken have a gender identity? Does that chicken commit suicide? And it's just like, what? That is how crazy these people are. Like, they are so detached from any sort of actual reality. Like, they take the whole "my truth" phrase to its absolute logical conclusion, where basically they don't have to think about anyone else aside from themselves. It's whatever their perception is at all times, that is reality to them. What they perceive reality to be, not what reality actually is. And then, like, even in the first interview, like, the first interview just it really exposes like the grooming process. So Matt says, it's like, I like scented candles. I've watched Sex in the City. How do I know that I'm a woman? And she was like, oh, that's a great question. Let's continue. And it's just like, how that is quite literally grooming? I mean, I don't really have any other way to describe it aside from grooming. It's just like, once again, the tone of voice, the way, like, her facial expressions, like, it's like I could tell she was like, oh, I'm gonna get another one, and it was like, oh my god. And my thoughts certainly aligned with Matt when he said, well, I'm actually even more confused. Because it's not, like, none of this is supposed to make any sense. Gender ideology, its talking points, it's not meant to make sense. And, well, like, speaking of, I guess, kind of the overall message, it's just like, yeah, like, these people just can't come to a consistent definition and always have to resort back to circular reasoning. And then not to mention, like, I don't know, like, it's about time that somebody really calls into question all this stuff, because if it's not, then it's just gonna fester. It's gonna get worse, and the definition is gonna get even crazier. And I think in the most recent episode, I think it was the one yesterday as of recording, where he was like, in about 5 years, if things don't get any better, it's like, there's gonna have to be what is a human? I got a kick out of that, but at the same time, it's like, eventually, who knows, because we're starting to see people, mainly children, start to identify as cats and dogs. Yeah, that's something to be worried about. But enough of me meandering. If I were to kind of say the overall message, the main theme of the movie, in a couple words, I would put it as gender ideology is complete, utter nonsense. Why? Because the people who believe in it can't come to a consistent definition of what is a man and what is a woman. Now, another favorite part of my film, and well, obviously it's the last part of the film, would be the ending. Like, despite Matt Walsh's 4-year journey, because he asked this question like 2018, and people went wild over it. But at the end of a long, arduous 4-year journey, and after an interview with Jordan Peterson, he finally gets the idea to ask his wife about the question, what is a woman? And her response, an adult human female. And he was just like, wow. Kind of. His facial expression was like, wow. Now that I said all the things I liked about the film, there are a couple things I wasn't too keen on. Like, I think the sudden change in tone could have happened a little bit sooner and a little bit differently, because I think so. There is a scene, a bit of a dramatized scene, where he has like this pin board of like various different people, magazines, historical examples of like women and all that. I think the line where he's like, you know, I forget the exact line, but basically it was like, I think I really have to start asking a little bit better questions. I think that's kind of what I was able to gauge from it. I think that should have happened a little sooner in the movie to kind of signify a better tonal shift, because it kind of, the change in tone was just like very sudden. And from my knowledge, when it comes to tone, it's like I I don't think it's really not easy to do that. Um, and I think it could have been done better here. But other than that, like, that's really my only complaint with the film. Um, and while I still have some time here, I'm also gonna address, I guess, criticisms of the film that other people have given. Um, I'm mainly gonna focus on one, and that would be like, Matt, why didn't you talk about God and all that? And he even explains it. It's just like, it needs to have as wide of a reach as possible. And considering that this orange is an atheist, I'm glad he didn't start talking about God and all that, because I think that actually would have devalued the movie quite a bit. It's like I understand in terms of a religious point of view already, like, what he has to think on gender ideology from that kind of view, but what needed to be done here is what needed to be done, like an actual thorough scientific analysis of why gender ideology is bullshit and nonsense. So to conclude this very, very lengthy video, first I'll give my score. I think the movie has earned, on the Scurvy meter, I can't believe I just said that, a 9.5. I think it's a really important movie. I think it's a good introduction to the problem that this country and the West is like facing. Um, and it also encourages you to do your own research on this matter as well. Um, and then, in addition, it's like, yeah, the film is absolutely needed, and it needs to be seen by as many people as possible, especially over here in the West, where this nonsense is firmly rooted and is festering. Then also, if you want to, I guess, see more movies like What Is a Woman, yeah, I mean, you could watch it for free, but what the Daily Wire is doing with their movies, like, that's supporter money that they're using to make, I guess, actual changes to the debates going on in this country about various different topics. Gender ideology is one of those topics. Now, I might sound like I'm shilling for the Daily Wire here, but I'm not. I'm merely saying, if you want a chance at kind of winning the culture war, you might actually want to start putting your money where your mouth is. If you know what that saying means. I assume everyone here does, because this is a video not made for kids. So yeah. Anyways, I think I've rambled on for long enough. Have a good day, everyone.